So I'm so delighted to have Mrs. Catherin Shakdam on my show. I hope that we can have a really honest interview. Thanks for coming to my show, Catherin. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
My first question would be that this all the things that happened has been revealed, I think, a little bit late, because the story was for 2017, and now it's about 2 months. I think that we can read this story over the websites or some news. Do you have particular reason for that?
No, I think what happens. So the interview, with Mr. Raisi took place in 2017 when he was running for the presidential against Hassan Rouhani at the time. So obviously he lost back then.
Yeah.
And then when he became president, I thought that, I wanted to write about, my experience and the interview that I conducted with him, because I thought that it was relevant to the, ongoing conversation, regarding the nuclear deal and other issues. And so I decided to basically write an article for the Times of Israel, recalling my experience, of Iran, and of course of my interview with President Raisi. I mean, it's not every day that you get to interview a president, whether it's Iran or any other country. So I just thought it was relevant to the conversation, and I chose the Times of Israel because, quite frankly, I knew that it was going, one, to hit a nerve, and two, I felt that it was that the conversation was needed, and it needed to happen on an Israeli media, because there's quite a lot of bad blood between Israel and Iran, and a lot has to do with Iran's stance towards Israel. And I thought that I would break the tie, and basically just write an analysis of my experience in the Times of Israel, and it created a bit of a stir. Which is interesting, is that my article was published on November 25th, if I'm not mistaken, around that time. And it only really kind of created a media storm about 2 weeks ago. And I think that the timing is quite telling of, certain factions' agenda. Because I would imagine that, my article had been read, back then, and that they decided to suddenly discover the article because, they wanted to maybe, one, discredit, President Raisi's administration. They are in discussion right now, regarding the nuclear deal in Vienna. And so obviously it kind of, the timing was right for them to create, a bit of a stir, and to try to derail the conversation and, make allegations of, espionage and, infiltration and, whatever else that they usually talk about when they disagree with you. There's a certain patterns in the way that the regime conducts its affairs against people it disagrees with, and usually slander is the kind of go-to. This is what they've done with me, which is fine, but I'm still waiting for them to address, the points that I make in my article. They haven't, so it's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting also for me because I don't know how many interviews did you do with Times of Israel. It was just one interview or more than one?
It wasn't. There was never any interviews. I'm writing opinion pieces about various subjects, so there was never an interview. I've now because since everything happened, the Times of Israel actually received many phone calls from Iran, which is rather unusual. Regarding me and the story that I've written, because, they wanted to speak to me, and it kind of led to the Times of Israel deciding to do a lengthy interview with me to try to understand my journey and, what led me to do the thing that I've done. And it's going to be published,
technically, it's just the only piece about this story that you have written that is written by yourself.
No,
did you have also another interview with other media? Or
no interviews. No interviews. I mean, everything that I've written in the Time of Israel are opinion pieces, and I've written about three op-eds for the Times of Israel. So it's. I mean, I started writing for them around November, and I've written 3 stories so far. Many others will come because now I kind of. I'm thinking that I have a lot more to say about Iran, and I want to, brush other subjects, and so I will continue to use that medium for that purpose.
That's cool.
And,
That's great.
I assume that people in Iran would be very pleased.
It's a little bit confusing for most of the people. That's the reason I think you're reading some rumors on the internet as well, because I saw lots of websites. Some of them were in Persian, but not Iranian website like Al Arabiya, or some of them were English news agencies, not so much famous, but all of them has the same a story. And all of them has mentioned the source of the story, Times of Israel, but I couldn't find these particular sentences
because it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Yeah. This is the thing they created, but this is what they do. Look, I was close to Iran's media machine, and so I know how they operate. They have many news agencies, various websites, and they call themselves news agency. They're not news agency. They basically peddling whatever narrative is coming out of Tehran, in the hope that if you repeat something long enough, it makes it true. Yeah. And what they do,
it works everywhere. It works everywhere.
It works. No, it is fake news. I mean, Iran did not invent fake news. So basically, what they do is they create news agencies and various media organizations and think tanks and whatever. And what they do is that they quote each other. When you quote, other independent news, it gives you this kind of appearance of credibility, giving readers the impression that you've done your homework and that everything that you say is actually backed up. Now, here's the problem when it comes to quoting the Times of Israel and the alleged interview that I've done saying that I had videos of, state officials and whatever else. There is no link to that interview because it doesn't exist. I never given any interview to the Times of Israel. Now, there is an interview that will be published in the Times of Israel, but you will find that we're not discussing any of the things that they claiming I've said, and the timeline doesn't add up anyway. So it's just what fascinates me is that they went quite far, in creating this lie, because they claiming that an interview happened when they cannot provide any link to that interview or video or a transcript, nothing at all. And they came up with the really strange stories that in my mind is actually damaging, not to my character, because I personally do not care what people say or think of me. It's actually slanderous towards their state officials, because the allegations are as follow. They claiming that as a spy for Mossad, which I am not. By the way, I don't speak Farsi, so if Mossad was to send me to Iran, I would need a translator. I don't believe that any good spy. I do think that you need to at least speak the language of the country you're supposed to to do your spying on. That would be obviously. That would be number one. But it's a bit beside the point. They are alleging that I exchange favors for against state secrets. So I know that they're trying to make me look really bad and to discredit me in the media. But what they're really saying is that their state officials are so corrupt and immoral that this is what they do on a daily basis.
They know that already, because there are lots of videos every day from
personally, there. If I was an Iranian citizen, I would seriously question the integrity of the government and my state officials, if indeed
you has been living here for some years, I think. You has been living here for some months, I think. At least nobody can here ask anything, that. So usually the people know everything, but they cannot say it out loud or something.
It's true,
it's
but
the way it is.
I think it's an insult to Iranians' intelligence. I mean, people are not stupid. There was another story that I found really comical, where apparently there is a video of me conducting an interview in Farsi with a gentleman that I've never met, and it's clearly not me in the video, quite clearly. But they say, oh, it's her, and I'm like, no, it's not me. I don't speak Farsi. And you would be hard pressed to actually tell me that this is me in the video when I don't look anything like the young woman who was in the video. She was quite pretty, so I was flattered, but it's not me. I'm sorry. And it's so funny to me to see that they would go to those to those lengths to try to justify and rationalize their narrative. They don't have a leg to stand on. And it would have been so easy to, rather than go after me, to criticize what I was saying, because at least you would be engaging in a genuine, conversation, and you might be able to make your point. But when you go after someone's character, you lost the conversation already, because it has nothing to do with anything.
Yeah, of course. Can I ask you some quick questions?
Yes, of course.
One of these things that was really stupid, I know it's not true, but I just want to know, have you heard it before or not, that you had to make relations with more than 100 Iranian official or Iranian officials? You know what I mean about relations.
I do. Okay. No, like, it's a flat out no. Look,
have you heard it before?
No, I heard it. I mean, it's look, people on Twitter have reached out to me saying, is that true? And I'm like, look, this is a ridiculous question to ask. 100%. Again, I think it reflects really badly on officials, or even in the media in general, to assume that this is something that state officials would actually play into. And if they are conducting themselves in such a manner with other people, I think that people need to seriously rethink, their government and how, those kind of individuals are even allowed to operate on the behalf of the people. That's number one. Number two, I've been in Iran a total of 5 times, around that. I can't exactly remember the number of times. It's about 5 times. And I think total, I stayed there for a maximum of 3 weeks.
Really?
Okay. Yes.
The whole 5 times, just 3 weeks?
That's it. My whole, I stayed maximum in Iran in total 3 weeks. So it was usually 3 days, 4 days, 3 days, 4 days. Okay. Now, 100 officials, that's a lot. It's a lot. But, I don't know. People will believe what they want to believe. It's not true. There's no foundation to this. And I would be curious to know who's their source, because the interview that they claim they took it from doesn't exist.
Actually, I know the source. I will tell you after the interview, because
sure.
All the news came from 1 or 2 Twitter accounts. I will introduce them to you after interview. But how did you decide to go to Iran? Can you explain that?
It wasn't really a decision. I was a political analyst. I was trying to find my way and work with interesting people. And I received an invitation one day.
Personally?
It was
per email,
it was
telephone?
Do you know what? I can't recall. I think it was an email that was sent to me from a committee. It was directly from Iran, telling me that a conference was going to be organized on Palestine in Tehran by the government, and that they would love to have me as a guest. Now, I wasn't I wasn't meant to speak. I wasn't meant to do anything other than attend. And as a political analyst who specializes in the Middle East, you would be foolish to pass on, an opportunity. Iran is a very closed-up country. So, for someone with a Western background, I was born and raised in France. France had always a lot of time and respect for Iran. I mean, we actually gave Ayatollah Khomeini, asylum for a little bit in France. And I think that there's always been very friendly ties between the two countries. Iran is a country that I always respected. I was always very fond of, the culture. And I wanted to go. I wanted to see, because it's the countries of the Ayatollahs. This is history literally in the making.
Catherin, did you have any idea how many foreigners were imprisoned in Iran at that particular time?
No,
you had absolutely no idea.
No, and I mean, look, you could call it naivety, or maybe if I was to receive an invitation, I wouldn't go. But because I know now what I didn't know then what I know now. And I think sometimes, just life works that way. I had no idea. And I know
sometimes with this job, journalism, you have to take some risks so you can go further.
I didn't
Otherwise,
look. I don't think that I was ever in danger. I don't think, for me, it was an opportunity that I didn't pass on. And then you also have to understand that, at the time, I really wanted to understand the other side. I really wanted to see for myself if Iran was what I thought it was, because back then, I was under the impression that Iran was very much misunderstood and misportrayed in the media. That there
really.
was more to the, yeah, I did. I genuinely did. I thought, because see, people need to understand something. When, I think it happened with communism as well. It's very easy for anyone to get seduced by the philosophy of a certain ideology, because on paper it's beautiful. Ayatollah
Exactly.
Khomeini spoke of social justice and freedom and women's rights and political self-determination and all those beautiful sentiments and principles that I personally felt rung true to me, because I wanted to see a country led by those principles. And I was thinking, maybe we misunderstood the revolution. And I also came from the position where I am a strong defender of political self-determination, in the sense
Sorry,
that I believe.
I'm dying to say that. Did you know Google back then?
No, I didn't. What do you mean, Google? Yeah.
Yeah,
Look,
you could you could have Googled everything.
I know, but it is, again, when you
Yeah,
read,
sorry to interrupt. Sorry, just,
when
that
you
was
when
just a
you
joke.
read certain things. I'm an academic, and so I allowed myself to be seduced by those ideas, rather than understand that between those ideas and the implementation of those ideas on the ground, there was a vast, there was a
Yeah.
massive ravine and a gap and a canyon, and it wasn't at all the result, of the implementation,
I know.
devolved into something very corrupt and fascist. I didn't know then, because I never seen Iran for myself. So my impression was that Iran was being misrepresented, and the government and the whole propaganda machine around Iran is really, really good at making you believe them and think that they are, the oppressed in the story. They're really good at this, and I completely fell for it. And I went there, and I was very enthusiastic, and I was very, I felt very privileged. And certain things happened during that trip that kind of shocked me a little bit, because I remember standing there at the conference hall, being, hearing certain state officials, calling for, the death to Israel, death to the Jews. As a Jew myself, well, it was a little bit hard to, it was a little bit hard for me to swallow, because, again, I was, and I have been throughout my career, very, very critical of Israel's, human rights violation. Not just against Palestinians, but just, across the board. I don't abide by human rights violation, regardless of who's conducting the violation. I don't think there's ever a justification. There's always a better way. Now, it doesn't mean, because my criticism of Israel's government has nothing to do with my desire to see my people annihilated. Because I believe that a government or a political system is not the same thing as the people that live under it. And we need to make the distinction quite clearly. So to have a state official, of the caliber of Ayatollah Khamenei, who's a cleric before he's a state official, someone who's advocating, morality and ethic and calling for compassion and tolerance, because those are the things that he calls for, and talks about Islamophobia and standing against oppression and continuing the revolution of Imam Hussein and standing up for the oppressed of the world. Say those words 10 feet away from me, is a bit of a wake-up call, personally. And it took me a really long time. It took me years to really internalize, what I saw, and understand that I had been lied to, that I had been manipulated, that they had played me, that I was a fool. And I think I made it my purpose and my duty to fix this, because I played a role in perpetuating the narrative that the government wants to project, and I refuse to be a pawn to their game anymore. And I will do everything I can to It's not so much expose them, it's just give people my perspective, my lived in experience, for them to decide whether they think that Iran is indeed, or rather the regime in Iran is worthy of, surviving the next decade. And me personally, I think that Iranians deserve a lot better from their state officials, and that they have the right to choose. They should be able to make a real choice. Yes, Iran is a democracy, and to some degree it's a functioning democracy, but the authority that the clerical class holds over the political system and society doesn't have room anymore in the 21st century, because it's a corrupt system. It's a system that is profoundly hypocritical, that is claiming traits and values that they are not implementing. So they're demanding loyalty from their people on the basis of their alleged morality, when those people are actually behaving in very, very corrupt ways. And we know this. We know this to be true. The simple fact that they cannot stand criticism tells you that there's a problem with the regime.
Yeah, of course, because how many things he says that he's the representative of God. And
do you know how dangerous that is? Do you realize how arrogant it is for someone to
believe
claim?
me, we have lived this life, so we are all familiar. So every Persian family, Iranian family had, for example, 2 or 3 persons in the prisons. All of the families now, maybe most of them, has lost someone who was fighting with the regime or something. I just want to make 2 short comments. One of them, you said about Khomeini in France, and there is an old joke towards us Iranian. We say we owe France a Khomeini. Sometimes we have to send someone there to make the life of the people a little bit harder, but that's just a joke, because what France did back then really ruined the country for more than 43 years, and we are not still sure that are we going to have a regime change or something this year, maybe next year. Now with this,
it will happen. I mean, change I think is difficult when you're talking about a dictatorship, especially when you're talking about a theocracy, which is what you have.
Yeah, of course. How did you decide to to cancel this work relationship with Iran? Something especially happened, or you said, okay, now I'm satisfied with my curiosity and I want to go back?
Do you know what happened? It was quite simple. I decided, I mean, look, for the longest time, I was wearing a headscarf for many reasons. And I just decided
you are really beautiful, but not in those pictures. But when I saw your pictures these days, that was really a good upgrade. I'm really happy that you threw that scarf away.
I wasn't. For me, and this is my personal belief. It doesn't. It's not a reflection on Islam or Muslim whatsoever. I'm not trying to pass judgment here. Me personally, the way that I wrestled, with the headscarf, because I feel it was a tool of oppression. And many times, I was defending it. I was saying all these different things that I did not actually believe. The reason why I was saying those things is because, I had to rationalize it, for myself and tolerate it in a way. But I did a little bit of introspection, and I realized that it was never me. I never associated with the headscarf, as a...
That was because of your ex-husband, I think, your ex-marriage.
Yeah,
he was Muslim
and you get used to it. It's funny because, and I think this is, again, I'm not saying that Islam is oppressive. I'm not saying this. I'm saying that for me, my personal experience of it was quite, oppressive. And a lot of the time I felt that it was just, I was conforming to certain things, just because I just didn't want to fight. I was tired of fighting my entire environment. And so I went along with it. And then something funny happens to you when you kind of bow to, peer pressure, is that you end up defending the very thing that makes you unhappy. Exactly. I think it's the very definition of brainwashing. And I think that's what happened to me. Now, it's not to say that I I didn't find beauty in Islam, because I did. And a lot of the values, especially in Shia Islam, I still hold true. But I do not would consider myself, I'm not a practicing Muslim. I consider myself an atheist. I'm very secular. And this is what makes me, comfortable in my identity. This is me. This is my journey. This is not a criticism on anyone. It's not me, it's me changing my mind. It's me doing some growing up. It's me exercising my, personal freedom to choose what path I want to follow. And I think that people are reading way too much into it. And I forgot your question.
Don't worry. I was just also thinking about what you're saying right now. I cannot be more.
Oh yes. Why? What the breakaway from Iran? When I decided to take off my headscarf, there was a massive shift in behavior, where Press TV suddenly decided that I wasn't good enough to give any interviews, because I was like, I'm not gonna be wearing the headscarf anymore, and there's nothing you could do said that would change my mind, because I am my own person. And then every single person that was my friend, still them, really disappeared, because I wasn't fitting the bill anymore. I wasn't the little the cute little tool that they had kind of molded to serve. They love to have Western convert. They really love it. The second you start to, I don't know, decide that, maybe you want to run in another direction, or maybe you're not happy with certain things, or you start to question, your environment and the belief system, or, anything that is not 100% in line with what the regime wants you to do, you become a persona non grata. And I actually am very happy that it happened, because by doing so, they showed me their true colors. That tolerance. The tolerance that they were advocating was actually skin deep. They mean they're tolerant towards you if you do exactly what they want you to do.
Of course, that's the way it is. But it brings another question. So what were you actually writing? Because nobody reads a website from Khamenei or from regime side. So you were a free woman. You were living in a free country. You got an invitation and you decided, because of it could be also some financial motives with
I
know. I said maybe because they are really generous. They are really generous with other people when they want to gather some forces to each other. But I mean, how could a free woman in a free country write something that they would accept to publish it on the website of the supreme leader?
Because I was talking about, and actually, I know they took my articles down, but everything that I was talking about, I still stand by it, because I meant it, and I still do to a great many degrees. I was basically talking about Islamic principles. So a lot of the time, there were commentaries, for example, on, Imam Hussein's revolution and what it means in terms of, the formulation of political ideas. I was talking about, the ideals of, for example, Arba'in. I was talking about,
So nothing politically. You're political analysis, but you decided to write some religious stuff that they already knew that.
I didn't decide. They ask you. So they tell you, we would like you to write, for example, about, Yemen from the perspective of Imam Hussein's revolution. How.
I read some of your articles in one of the Yemen's website, but who gave you the questions with Raisi? Because I think you were not allowed to ask some question from yourself.
No, but that's not exactly true. So what happened is that the agreement was that RT was going to send me a series of questions, because obviously they were not. I was acting on behalf of. I was just a conduit. I wasn't there to just give people my 2 cents or anything. I was literally, just, the person conducting the interview, but it wasn't about me. So RT sent a series of questions that they wanted answered. We sent those questions over to Raisi's office, or whoever was in charge of media, whatever. And then they came back and they said, we're going to answer this, and this, and then we want you to ask this, and this, and this. And then there was a little back and forth.
This person has introduced to you another Talebzadeh.
Well, it was him who coordinated the interview. Yes.
So I was right. Okay, then you were saying?
No, that was it. So they basically, we had a bit of a back and forth in between RT and, Raisi's team in terms of the questions that they would agree upon. And then once that was done, I've asked the questions, but they were not my questions.
Yeah, it was RT's questions, but can you please describe why they decided to ask you to do the interview? Because they already have really good relationship with Iran.
It's very simple, and I'm pretty sure that after telling you, the government will change their policy. I'm French, and I do not need to have a visa to get to Iran. I get my visa from the airport. That was it. Because RT knew that I was French. They knew that I had better access to Iran, because if you're British, for example, and you go to Iran's embassy to ask for a visa, it will take about 3 weeks if they give it to you. And they ask you like a million papers to justify this and this and this.
Yeah, but RT is Russian.
French person. They're Russian, yes, but they don't have. It's difficult for them to go to Iran.
Russians don't need visa to come to Iran. I think it's a couple of years.
They asked me. It was back in 2017.
It's interesting.
So maybe then, I don't know. All I know is that they called me and they say, hey, we know that you have a French passport. You were in Iran before. You don't need a visa. I mean, it's at the airport. It's quite easy. Would you like to do the interview, on our behalf? And I was like, that's absolutely fine.
Can I ask some, not so personal, but a little bit personal questions?
Sure, go ahead.
You has been married with a Muslim person from Yemen, and now you say that you're atheist, yeah?
I'm what?
Don't believe
an atheist,
you're
yes.
Atheist, yeah, you're now atheists. So it's a really big paradigm shift, what I can see here. What made you think that you can be married with a Muslim? Because it's really hard to understand.
I was 18 years old and I didn't know. Simple. I
was very young. That he was Muslim?
No, I did know he was Muslim. I didn't know what that meant.
Okay.
I was born and raised in France. France is a very secular society. So even though obviously we have a Muslim community, back then, when I was 18 years old, a while back,
now I think it's so obvious.
Muslim were very different in that they were very secular, and that being Muslim meant as much as a Christian saying that they do Christmas, but they don't do anything else. So my understanding of religious identity was a very secular one. So when someone was telling me I'm a Muslim, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Jew, I'm a this, I'm a that, I was like, okay. And I didn't really care because it's never been something for me that matters, in the sense that I do not judge people, on the basis of their creed or their ethnicity, because I don't think it's relevant to the conversation. I think it's very enriching to learn from people's traditions and cultures, but I don't judge people because of it or on the basis of it. So for me to be married to a Muslim man at the time didn't bother me too much, because I didn't see why it should be a thing. I never thought in a million years that it would become a problem. But then I very quickly realized that the problem wasn't my acceptance of the tradition, but rather their refusal to accept that I was a Jew, and that no amount of washing was going to to change that. It's an ethnicity before it's a religion. So I'm afraid that it's in my DNA. And it's here to stay. There's nothing I could do about it. And I don't think that anyone should want to do anything about it. Being a Jew is not a bad thing. It's not a disease. It's not a virus. It's not a pandemic. And people not just in Iran, but across the world, need to seriously get over themselves when it comes to anti-Semitism, because there is no room for this anymore. We've done the 1930s. Can we please move on to something else? It's just doesn't work. Jews have been around for thousands of years, and I think we're going to stick around for a little bit longer. And if people don't like it, tough luck.
We had a call from Turkey. A man was asking, I hear that there are some people around the world that they have still some humanities in themselves. This person who has to move with wheelchair inside the house, and he needs help just to sleep on the bed or getting up from the bed, and this is the way he has to go if he ever decides to go outside with his, of course, broken wheelchair and so many medicines which he can't afford to buy them again.
با سلام خدمت همه عزیزانی که لطف میکنن و این ویدیو رو نگاه میکنن. خدمتتون عرض کنم من بابک هستم، بچه آبادانم. از سال 2015 به خاطر مشکلاتی که برام پیش اومد توی ایران مجبور شدم همراه همسرم و 2 فرزندم به ترکیه بیایم. خیلی سخت و به سختی گذشت. ما اونجا به خاطر شرایطی که داشتم باید یه خونه همکفی گیر می آوردیم. متاسفانه این خونه گیر ما نیومد. ما مجبور شدیم توی مغازه زندگی می کردیم. 2 تا اتاقک داشت عقبش که مثل انبار بود، یه دستشویی تعبیه کرده بودن و خلاصه اونجا رو مسکونی کردیم و 2 سال تمام تو اون سرمایی که اون شهر داره ما اونجا زندگی می کردیم. سال 2018 من از روی تخت اومدم برم روی ویلچر، ولی چون که ترمزای ویلچر فیکس نشده بود، من فکر کردم که فیکسه. از روی تخت که اومدم حرکت کنم، دستمو که گذاشتم روی ویلچر اومدم برم روی ویلچر، من زمین خوردم و پای چپم از انتهای رونش از استخون فمر شکست، بدترین جای ممکن. خیلی سختی کشیدم، خیلی بدبختی ها کشیدم. تمام اکثر بیمارستان ها رو ما اینجا رفتیم و قادر به درمان نبودن، چون چندین سال قبلش توی ایران من همون پام از یه مقدار پایین‌تر توی استخون رون شکسته بود و پلاتین خورده بود. الان از بالای پلاتین شکسته بود و امکان جراحی نبود، چون باید اون پلاتین رو در می آوردن. پلاتین هم چون دستخوش زمان شده بود جزوی از استخون شده بود و می گفتن ریسک خیلی بالایی داره، مرگ و عفونت و آمبولی و نمیدونم قطع عضو و این چیزا، و ما اینو عمل نمیتونیم بکنیم. تجهیزات و دستگاهی خاصی میخواد که اینجا وجود نداره. من کماکان که درد میکشیدم حدود 8-9 ماه گذشت و با همین درد بیمارستانهای دیگه، آنکارا، استانبول، خود اسکیشهیر، هم با اقسام بیمارستانا رفتم، ولی تنها چیزی که میتونستم خودم آروم کنم باهاش مسکن بود. با مسکن خوردن پایی که بی‌حس بود، پایی که الان شما چاقو بدم ببری من فقط نگاهت میکنم، ولی اون درد استخونو من چطوری بگم، مثل دستم یا هر جای دیگه کامل حس میکردم و اذیت میشدم. و تا همین الان که من با شما صحبت میکنم به همین شکل هست که من الان اگر توجه کنید حدود 20 سانت، چون استخون پام شکست رفت بالا کنار پام، از کنار پام هم زده بیرون. من 20 سانت 15 سانت پای چپم از زانو از پای راست کوتاه‌تره. چند ماهی هستش که باز دست راستم از ناحیه کتف و شونه آسیب دید، توی بلند شدن آسیب دید و پاندوماش کش اومده. اذیتم، من محدودیت دارم، دستمو نمیتونم تا یه حدی بالاتر ببرم با درد همش. هیچ کدام از کارهای شخصی خودم رو متاسفانه نمیتونم انجام بدم و حقیقتاً به جایی رسیدم که دیگه کاری از دست خودم برای خانوادم بر نمیاد و یه جورایی شرمنده خانوادم شدم. من غیرتم طوری بود، یعنی مرامم طوری بود که هیچ وقت، یعنی تا اون جایی که ممکن بود تقاضای کمک از کسی نمی کردم. ولی واقعا الان مدتیه که چند ماهیه که به جایی رسیدم که واقعا دیگه از دست خودم برای خانوادم هیچ چیزی بر نمیاد، نمیتونم کمکی بکنم به خانوادم. من از زمانی که دستم آسیب دید 12 تا آمپول نوشتن که هر شب تزریق میکردیم، باز جواب نداد، چون واقعا من فقط با دستام میتونم تکون بخورم. حتی لحظه‌ای هم که تو خوابم برای جابجا شدن من با دستامم، یعنی واقعا این دستا بود که میتونست ادامه زندگی رو برای من میسر کنه. الان اونم ندارم و یه جورایی میگم شرمنده خانوادم شدم. تو خواب نمیتونستم زیاد تاب بخورم پای چپم افتاده بوده روی پای راستم، چون بیشتر روی دست راست میخوابیدم، باعث شد ساق پای راستم زخم بستر بگیره، عفونت کرد، این پام شد تنه درخت. یه زخم عین همین زخم کنار پام هست رو سر استخونی که شکسته. به هیچ عنوان این خوب نمیشه چون فقط پوسته و روش استخونه. توی تأمین مخارج زندگیم واقعا موندم. من الان حدود بالای 6 ماهه که ویلچرم شکسته. انقدر بردم جوش دادم پیش این استاد کار ترکه، گفت دیگه نیارش، این آلومینیوم هر وقت جوش میدی از بالاترش میشکنه، خشک میشه. پایش رفتم بخرم، گیر نمی اومد. یه جا گفتن 350 لیر پایشه. حقیقت نداشتم که بخوام بخرم. با سیم من برداشتم اینو بستم. با بچه‌هام بیرون نمیرم که خجالت نکشن از این وضعیت. خلاصه این که هیچ فریادرسی نیست اینجا.
Hey, beloved Babak, we have lots of kind people around the world. We will try to broadcast your voice. They will definitely help you.
این درد دل منه و بازم اگر که این فیلمو ببینید و هیچ کمکی از طرف کسی نشه، من از شما بابت این که وقت گذاشتید و صدای منو شنیدید، درد منو شنیدید تشکر میکنم.
Hey Babak, just take a rest. Now that the people know your problems, they will definitely help you. Take relax, man. با نوروز بهار امید را هدیه دهید. To help Babak, you can go to www.noruz.org and click on the donate link, or you can call us through these numbers 001 704 544 7800. But it was interesting that you said you saw some beauty in Islam, but if you...
Oh, I still do.
Yeah, I know. I saw lots of beauties, but I also saw some little things that makes the whole things really ugly. For example, it's just maybe the only religion that says, okay, you are allowed to kill other people or a bunch of people if you have a really tiny reason for it. For example, they were Muslims and now they decided to convert to another religion. So
but look, you could, I mean, arguably you could say this about every religion. There's always a darker side, to religion.
None of the religion claim that they have a book that has been written by the hands of the Prophet, and they are the purest speech of the God.
That is true.
So
but,
that makes it really dangerous.
I think that if you take the Torah, for example, it's not exactly, the Old Testament is not the kindest of books, okay?
Yeah,
and an eye for an eye is not particularly compassionate. That said, not everyone takes it literally.
I don't want to argue with you right now about that, because I know that, I have been Muslim for more than maybe 35 years. So I've read it. I've also read some description of really famous people in Islam, and something that if I want to argue about that, maybe it takes days about that. But I'm really happy that now you're converted to nothing, I would say, because no one wants to kill someone in the name of nothing.
I don't agree. Look, as much as I very much respect Islam for some of the principle that it's advocating, because they are admirable, I profoundly disagree with any advocating of, violence against any group of people. I do not think that oppression or any form of imposition on someone, whether spiritually or politically or socially, is acceptable. I think that, we have to respect the right for people to choose for themselves what it is that they want to do. Everyone has a journey. You need to let them. I think that we need to be respectful of everyone's differences and wishes. And this is why, you know, I think democracy is the only viable option that we have, because we do not have anything better yet.
Yeah, of course.
In my mind, I mean, I think that history has proven to us that communism doesn't work, fascism doesn't really work, at least not for everybody. So, you know, like theocracies are a very dangerous form of government because it devolves into something quite fascist and oppressive. I mean, we're seeing this with Iran, we're seeing this with Saudi Arabia, for example. You know, and we also need to understand that, because Iran has done this a lot. Iran is trying to defend its position by attacking other people. So they're basically projecting and deflecting. Rather than say, you know, our values are strong enough to stand on their own and that we do not need to exist in opposition of other people. And I think that the reason why Iran is so, you know, put the emphasis on anti-Semitism and this desire to annihilate, you know, all Jews everywhere, it's because they understand that hatred is a rallying cry and some kind of, it's almost a new universal cry, you know, to call people to support them because they don't have anything else to offer but hatred. And I'm afraid to say that, you know, it's very easy for people to hate. It's harder for them to feel compassion and love for other people. And so, you know, it's kind of the default system. So they play into people most, you know, I would say less than admirable traits, you know, to fund and support their machine, you know, when really what they should do is actually try to lead through example. You don't need to annihilate your enemies and enemies on the basis of what? Because this is the thing too I'm not so clear on, because they, you know, they keep banging on about the Palestinian cause, which is like, you know, fair enough. Nobody wants to see anyone suffer, Palestinian or not. But what is it that you're doing exactly to help Palestinians other than fund and actually utilize the victimhood of Palestinians for your own political purpose? That's not helping anyone. That's not helping people. Helping means empowering people. How are they empowering anyone?
Of course,
they're advocating hate. They're advocating hate when they should be building bridges. And the only way to solve the problem between Israel and Palestine is, number one, mind your own business, because if you're not Palestinians and you're not Israeli, you don't have a right to contribute to that conversation as far as I'm concerned. And that means me. I'm not an Israeli. So I'm a Jew, but I don't live in Israel. So I haven't experienced what Israeli experience every day. My contribution to that conversation should be to offer, you know, an ear and maybe my advice, but I cannot tell anyone what to do, what to say, because I don't live there. So we need to back off and actually realize that if you want to help people, you need to create an environment that allows for discourse and for people to talk to one another. And that means to stop demonizing one party against the other. Because ultimately we're people. So we have to live together.
You know, all the Iranian people say that you're not allowed to send our money, our oil money, our, you know, capitals to other countries to make, you know, everything worse or make more wars in the region, in Middle East, in Syria, in Palestine or other countries as well. But I believe they need it, because they can just pursue their Shia strategy just when there is a really big chaos in the region. Otherwise,
it's a form. Do you know what's ironic is that a lot of the time they are very critical of, you know, Western capitals on the basis that, you know, we are a former imperial power, which is true. This is our history. But they're doing the same thing, except they're hiding behind religion. But it's a form of imperialism.
Or maybe worse, because as my experience in this, you know, journalism, some of the Western countries, they need chaos in some countries, but they want controlled chaos. So the chaos will be there, but they have also maybe some excuses to stay there because there is chaos there.
Absolutely. But I mean, look,
Islamic Republic of Iran, they need uncontrolled chaos so they can say, look, there are chaos, but Western countries cannot handle that. That's the reason that we have to be there. So that's the reason of most of the suicide bombing or some other things that's going on at the moment with these militia groups or something. But I want to ask your opinion as a political analyzer. Do you think this JCPOA 2015 will be launched again?
I hope not. Once upon a time, I was actually very much in favor of the JCPOA, in that I believed that it was better for the international community to bring Iran back into the fold, because it's always better to talk to people as opposed to isolate them, because in isolation, things devolve. And I thought back then that Iran was genuinely not interested in developing a nuclear weapon. I thought that the Israelis were literally paranoid and were basically projecting their fear, onto Iran. I changed my mind for many great reasons, because I've seen over the years, and since President Trump kind of reneged on the whole thing, I've seen how quickly Iran kind of returned back to developing its nuclear program. And state officials can say whatever it is that they want.
They were never put it aside. They were pursuing it. They were doing that.
I know, but I think that sometimes you need to go through the motion, and things had to happen the way they did. I think for people to actually see, well, you were never serious, about stopping your activities. And I think it's quite clear now. I think you would need to be a fool to actually genuinely believe that Iran is not interested in developing nuclear weapons. And in my mind, it's not so much the issue of having Iran having nuclear weapon. That's not the biggest problem. It's what it means for the region, because if Iran is allowed to develop such weapons of mass destruction, so this is not the case of Saddam Hussein and the invisible weapons of mass destruction. This is real. That means that Saudi Arabia could do that. It means that any other country, for that matter, could do that. Now, do we really want to have a nuclear arm race, knowing that regimes such as Iran, who are ultimately unstable regimes because they will not last, do we really want to give nuclear weapons to such people? I don't think so. And people can make the argument that Israel has nuclear weapons, but Israel had nuclear weapons since the 1960s and haven't used any. So it tells you that it's a responsible power. People may agree or disagree with that statement in terms of Israel standing, in their relationship with, Palestinians and the crimes that were committed, because crimes were committed, we have to say so. It's not a genocidal power. It's a responsible secular democracy at the end of the day. Not a perfect one. It's one with many problems that are, very idiosyncratic and very particular to Israel, that no other nation has faced before, because Israel faced annihilation on a daily basis. So that means that it needs to develop, certain tools to protect itself, which is its right to protect itself. But it didn't use nuclear weapons. It didn't blow up anything. I mean, Iran literally threatened to blow up the entirety of, Israel when General Soleimani was killed, and allegedly Israeli did it.
Catherin, we have a really simpler and really clear reply to this question. Israel has missiles, but Israel has never used it without a reason to other countries. But
exactly. Look,
Islamic Republic is doing that at the moment.
Israel, throughout its history, has only ever, and this is a fact, it's not my opinion, it's a fact, only acted in self-defense. Like it or not, that's the truth. So, you need to think about this for a second. Israel never started a war. It only retaliated to attacks perpetrated against its people and its border. And in keeping with international law. Now, were abuses committed? Absolutely. But what government and what country can claim to never ever had slip-ups? It's impossible. I mean, the French committed horrible crimes in Algeria. The Brits committed crimes throughout the colonies. I mean, this is something that we need to come to terms with. No one is better than anyone else. Abuses are part of history, and I think it's just part of it's an expression of our humanity, whether we like it or not. Now, Iran is claiming that it's always acting, for the greater good of people.
Yeah,
but
of course. We have made also some genocide in India back then.
This greater good is responsible for, the death of thousands and 10,000s and hundreds of thousands of people, including their own people, dying, as a result of the sanctions.
That's something that I can't believe, because
but you need to think about this for a second. You need to think about this for a second.
Yeah, but it's not possible.
For the sake of power and holding on to an ideology that is rooted in hatred of other people and other community on the basis of religion, something that Islam stands against. Millions of Iranians suffer needlessly.
Yeah, of course.
And I would like someone to answer me that question. Why and for what purpose?
Yeah, good question. And now you're asking, you can ask that because you're outside the country. If you were inside, then it would be really hard consequences.
Exactly. So how is that not explained? This is the thing that bothers me as well. When you have a regime that claims to have inherited Imam Hussein's revolution, and you know of the character of Imam Hussein and what he's done in Karbala, which is basically speak in the face of oppression and stand true, right? How is that doing that? How is that doing that?
That's some forbidden question that you're not allowed to ask, because they know exactly what they are doing.
Exactly. But this is something. This is that the reason why, the whole Husseini movement was born to defend that, to defend the right of people to choose and to ask questions, because we are being told by clerics. I'm not a cleric. We are being told by clerics that Islam allows for critical thinking, calls for critical thinking. Read. I think it's one of the first things that Gabriel told the Prophet Muhammad. Read.
Yeah, of course.
That infer the need to educate yourself, and that means asking questions.
Yeah, but
the regime
the problem
is denying
everyone can translate
Iranians
it to
the right
other,
to do that.
Everyone can translate it as he wish. So
I know.
It's not something that we can say.
I mean, look, even if you look at the way that Islam was actually taught at the time of the Prophet, people used to come to him and ask questions. Did they get rebuffed? Did they get the head cut off for asking a question, the wrong questions? No. So why a regime who claims, to speak on behalf of, can allow, can actually take such liberties to do the thing that their prophet refused to do, on the principle that you have to respect people's right to choose and people's life.
I think it would be better if we can compare their actions with with their own speeches from the first days of the Islamic Revolution, because if we want to go really back to what Prophet Muhammad has said and what people did back then, we cannot prove something because no one was there at the time.
That's exactly why people ask me, why did you change your mind?
Exactly.
Because there's a dichotomy in between what you claiming and what you're doing. And I'm sorry, I have enough integrity to not play by those rules, because I believed what they were saying, but I saw that what they were saying was a lie because they were not implementing it on the ground, and therefore I had to distance myself from them.
Catherin, you're a really brave woman.
No,
I'm not exaggerating.
No,
you're speaking freely.
I'm not.
Lots of people, they are afraid to say that I have experienced Islam and I decided to not accept it anymore. You walked into the country that most of the people, when they want to come to this country, when Islamic Republic here is in power, they say goodbye to their family because they don't know if they are able to come back or not. So you are technically a brave woman. That's something that I admire about you. But let me jump to another question, totally different. You are still in relation with one of the Russian news agency or something, yeah? You're still writing something for them?
No, I'm not. I haven't for years.
Oh, okay. It was in your Wikipedia website. My mistake.
Oh, I discovered that I have Wikipedia. I didn't write it. So, and Wikipedia could be edited, from anyone, anywhere in the world, so they could say whatever they want. I haven't worked for RT for years now. I do sometimes interviews. They ask me to come on and do commentaries on Yemen. But I'm a political analyst. I'm not attached.
What is your prediction about this invasion? How far do you think Putin will go? Just Kiev or the whole Ukraine, or maybe the other countries?
To be completely honest with you, I don't think I could volunteer my opinion, because I do not know enough about the conflict. I know nothing about Ukrainian politics. I don't know what Vladimir Putin is doing. I'm not going to pretend that I'm privy to any state secrets or conversations or anything. I'm not a specialist on this. I'd rather not answer.
Okay, no problem. No.
So, I have personal valuable enough to actually add to the conversation.
So is there anything special that you want to mention in this interview? Is there anything important that you have missed that before in other interviews that you want to mention here?
Well, the only thing, I've said it before, but I think it's important, and people will most likely dismiss it. It's just, the only reason my article irked the regime so much was because it was written by a Jew in an Israeli media, and I happen to be a woman. So I'm literally I'm the trifecta, I'm everything that they hate. And that says something about them. You can't judge people, you really cannot. You can't claim holiness and judge people on the basis of their ethnicity or their religion. It's just abhorrent. You cannot do that. It's a heinous crime. It's not pretty. And I think that everything that has been said about me in terms of trying to discredit my character, falls into this line. And it's something I'm used to, unfortunately, because like I said, I lived in the Middle East, so I faced anti-Semitism great many times. And for the longest time, I was ashamed, of being a Jew, because they almost, they did, because, systematic bullying, people literally, whenever Israel was, sneezing, I was held responsible. And I'm not a country. I'm not, and it's not because you're a Jew that you're necessarily Israeli, and you could be Israeli and not be a Jew. And this is something that literally flies over the head of many states officials in Iran. And they do not understand that, you could be Jewish and disagree with what Israel is doing, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that you're calling for a Holocaust. My grandfather was in a camp. So I know, and my other grandfather, fought in the French resistance against Nazi Germany. So I know exactly, my family lived fascism and fought against fascism. And this is something that, they taught me, that it's not, when we talk about justice and defending people's right to be and to exist freely and away from harm, this is not a principle that you need to take lightly. This is something that you need to live. And you need to, you need to do that every day and to commit to those values every day. And I refuse to play into this narrative of hatred. I won't tolerate it. And I'm just sick of Iran just, spewing anti-Semitism to justify its existence. Just find something else. Try to do good. Maybe people will look up to you, but, enough with the anti-Israeli, anti-Jewish, anti-this, anti-that. Enough, anti-Sunni. They're hating everyone. It's not just the Jews, by the way. They hate anyone who's not exactly them. So whether you're Sunni or you Zaydi or you Alawites, because the Alawites up until just a few years ago were literally non-Shia, because they were saying they're not real Shia, they're crazy. But now they're Shia Muslim because it's politically, correct. There's a great degree of hypocrisy that I think needs to be aired. People need to talk about it. And if they don't want to talk about it, it just says a lot to not only the character, but their unwillingness to be held accountable.
Yeah, exactly. For the last, sentence, I want to tell you another joke from Iranian people. They said this kind of persons from Islamic Republic, they go every Friday to Friday, praying, and they all have special slogans. Death to the whole world except us. So West, East, North, South doesn't make any difference.
That's exactly what I was talking about. Iran today, as the government, I'm not talking about the people. I'm never talking about Iranians, because they're actually not even part of that conversation. The Iranian government exists in opposition and rejection of other people. And sometimes that means their own people. Because they're refusing to allow for a space to be created for people to choose how they want to be ruled.
Yeah.
And that's the very definition of oppression.
Catherin Shakdam, thank you very much for accepting my invitation. I hope I could, have this pleasure another time to have you here as a guest in my program. Thank you very much and have a nice day.
You're very welcome. You take care.
Bye.
Bye.